You know, looking back, Arthur might not be the wholesome PBS Kids. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that slowly follows you as you run away.
Stormcaller, Lord of the Eshin. Yes. All the Warpstone. Mine. Chief Master of Deep Warrens. The Liber Bubonicus predicts this. No one controls Warlord Queek.
There'll be a reckoning. The true Von Gogh.
They will all pay.
I am the chosen of the gods.
The old world is weak. In their own incessant and petty wars. Ignorant of what truly awaits in the north. I come before the mighty Archaon as a mere minion. For now, at least, the gods' favored champion chooses to hear my advice. I pray to the dark powers that I do not fail him. Despite such a risk, I urge my master that now is the time to march south. The Northmen grow restless. We must harness that and send the tribes in a great tide southwards to flood the old world. Archaon himself, chosen of the gods, will lead the hordes of chaos as we despoil the lands of men and dwarfs. No soul, no matter how blackened or pure, shall see salvation.
But then pops out in front of you with a machete of science. It's October, and you know what that means. That Halloween's already been canceled due to the unrelenting kicking the balls that is 2020. It honestly makes me really sad, since Halloween is one of my favorite times of the year. But you know what? I ain't wallowing around in what we don't have. I'm reveling in what we do have. And this cloud has itself a silver lining. Sure, we may not be able to engorge ourselves with free candy given to us by strangers this year, but we can still dress up and creep ourselves out all month long by spending time inside watching classic spooky movies. When it comes to Halloween horror staples, I've already covered Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger on the channel, but there's still one man missing from this trifecta of terror. You all know who I'm talking about. Released on May 9th, 1980, the spookiest season of them all, Friday the 13th was the smash hit that would launch one of the most iconic horror franchises in history. It would be the movie to introduce the world to the unstoppable killer, Pamela Voorhees, the vengeful mother who killed extremely hormonal camp counselors in her quest for revenge. Yeah, if you've never seen the original Friday Friday the 13th, Jason isn't actually the killer of that movie. And even then, his iconic hockey mask isn't introduced until the third one. Anyway, when the series starts, his mother Pamela is the one doing all the killings because her son Jason drowned in the lake years before, when lustful camp counselors were too busy being stereotypical horror characters to save him. After his death, Pamela lost her head and tried her best to keep the camp permanently closed, but during the finale of Friday the 13th, she literally loses her head via decapitation. And this is where things get weird. Weirder? Right before the closing credits of that 1980 film, a still 11-year-old Jason pops out of Crystal Lake and supposedly pulls Alice, the hero, down into the water. Alice survives this attack, and in Friday the 13th Part 2, no one believes her story. There's no evidence to corroborate it. Instead, we meet Jason, now a grown man who wears a sack over his head, hunting down more counselors. This confusing revelation means one of two things. Jason either grew into a hulking menace overnight, or since they never found Jason's dead body in the lake in 1957, it means that he's been living an idyllic life in the woods and only emerges again because his mom was killed in the first place. Regardless of which of these two scenarios is true, a legend was then born. A legend who eventually travels to HE double hockey sticks and to space before settling down as a farmer of 5-leaf plants that'll get us demonetized. Seriously, the 2000 before settling down as a farmer of 5-leaf plants that'll get us demonetized. Seriously, the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th goes to some very strange places. Across the 12 installments released between 1980 and 2009, Jason became a pop culture icon. His recognizable hockey mask, the ridiculous kills, his infamous music, and most of all, his mastery of the element of surprise. You see, one would think that someone as huge and strong as Jason would be super slow, and he is, most of the time. But then there are those moments throughout the series where he just seems to appear in a place unexpectedly. It's an impressive jump scare to say the least, but also an impressive feat of movement where he seemingly teleports from point A to point B. Like, how else could he have done that move without getting seen? It's actually a debate that's been raged by fans of this series for decades. Can Jason actually teleport? Because outside of regenerative abilities that render him basically immortal and just being really, really strong, he doesn't have any other supernatural powers. It's become such a thing that 2017's Friday the 13th the game featured a teleportation option. But is it true? Is Jason Voorhees just a strong dude with an iron will to live, or does he actually have magical powers that are aiding him in his revenge spree? That, my fellow theorists, is what we aim to prove today, coming to the definitive answer as to whether Jason Voorhees can teleport. Since the Friday the 13th franchise has such a loyal fan base and we didn't want them to #blame Jason for missing obvious moments, we scoured F13 message boards to put together a list of moments that potentially feature teleportation. We then
To the four corners!
Blood, salt,
There'll be a reckoning.
Hear my advice.
Did a rewatch of the entire series to make sure that we weren't missing anything. Ultimately, across the franchise's 12 movies, we wound up with 5 key moments that absolutely deserved a closer look. The first is a moment from the fan favorite Part 6, Jason Lives. This is the film that introduced the world of the entire series to make sure that we weren't missing anything. Ultimately, across the franchise's 12 movies, we wound up with 5 key moments that absolutely deserved a closer look. The first is a moment from the fan favorite Part 6, Jason Lives. This is the film that introduced the world to Super Jason, a Jason that was dead, maybe? But then awakened when lightning hits the metal rod stabbed through his body. In the scene, a couple is driving to Camp Crystal Lake when they're halted in their tracks by Jason. Upset that the obviously threatening masked killer won't clear the road for them to pass, the male character Darren does what any sane person would do, force his girlfriend to drive forward, almost hitting the pedestrian before getting out his handgun and waving it around like an idiot. Needless to say, he dies fast. His girlfriend Lisbeth attempts to escape, and in true Friday the 13th fashion, falls over her own feet into a puddle and chooses to stay there. While in the puddle, she frantically reaches into her wallet and pulls out some cash to bribe Jason so he can buy a new machete or jumpsuit, I guess. However, when she looks up, he's gone. Seconds later, Jason lands down behind her and finishes her. So, was it teleportation or something else? What makes this one easy to debunk is something that we'll be seeing a lot throughout this episode. Lisbeth takes her eyes off of Jason for 8 seconds while searching for her wallet. This gives Jason plenty of time to run around a tree and, surprise, impale her from behind. Why do I know it's enough time? As a test, I walked in a straight line for 8 seconds, covering over 40 feet with no problem. Also, in Friday the 13th Part 2, we learned that Jason is totally capable of brisk jogs. And in Part 7, New Blood, he has the ability to explode through windows with surprising agility. Jason Voorhees is just an athletic athletic guy who only chooses to rush when he wants to get that sweet, sweet kill. It's not surprising that Jason would run to the tree to the right of Elizabeth, throw her off her guard, and then jump in the air to land that brutal blow. Is it unnecessary? Absolutely yes. But remember, this is also a man who climbed a tree to drop down from it and land a brutal triple decapitation. In the end, Jason covered like 10 feet max, and Elizabeth would have never seen it as she was digging in her wallet the entire time. Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan gives us our next moment of teleportation. It starts with Jason reawakening yet again, this time after being electrocuted underwater. Looking for some fresh victims, he sneaks onto a boat named the SS Lazarus, haha, cute name there guys, and immediately starts bumping off high school graduates. One of those victims is Miles, who comes across Jason on the upper deck of the Lazarus boat. After an unsuccessful attack, Miles runs and climbs down a ladder. Normally, running away without tripping is a smart move in a horror film, and yet when Miles gets to the deck below, Jason's already waiting. Many point to this as Jason teleporting. I point to this as Jason not skipping leg day. This drawing shows the journey in red that Miles took. While climbing down the ladder, Jason in yellow could have easily jumped down to the lower deck like he's done countless other times in prior films. The nice thing about being a supernatural killer is that you have supernatural knees that can absorb supernatural impacts. Plus, notice Jason's heavy breathing after that scene, suggesting that he sprinted while Miles simply ran. Jason just got himself in some solid cardio. No, that's not what's inexplicable in the scene. What defies explanation is why Miles, on a completely open air boat, decides that the only option he has is to escape straight up a ladder. He never considers running back to where he came from or, you know, jumping off the boat into the water. Nope, climb the ladder. Sure, that makes the most sense. I love how Jason just stands there and watches as Miles climbs, just thinking, can't believe that worked. Now, my buddy James from Dead Meat says that the ladder climb here shows Jason's ability to teleport.
Guys, did we mention that Jason can definitely teleport now?
But I gotta disagree. There are 7 seconds when Jason is off screen. More than enough time for him to get up that ladder behind his victim. See how Miles slows and eventually stops as he gets midway up the ladder? Jason loves hiding in barns. He loves climbing trees so he can jump down to nail some awesome triple kills. He is a pro climber. No, the much harder to explain moment from this movie comes earlier with Eva Watanabe. In it, good girl Eva is chased, without falling again, by Jason into what I lovingly call the disco lounge. Once there, she runs around and learns that all the other doors in the room are locked. And when she looks back toward where she entered, Jason bursts through. This is where things start to get real teleporty, as Eva begins to look around the room and sees Jason everywhere she looks. At first glance, it appears undeniable that Jason is teleporting across the room and is using his supernatural abilities to taunt and frighten Eva. However, after further inspection and research, I don't think the teleporting actually explains what we're seeing here. The F13 fandom page suggests that Eva might be hallucinating to distress, flash blindness, panic, and the fact that she spun around the room 7 times before Jason entered. I'm actually inclined to agree with this interpretation, but for more detailed reasons. You see, 15 minutes before she meets her untimely end, we see Eva doing drugs with her friend Tamara. Though she initially refuses, Eva does eventually take a hit. This leads me to believe that what we're seeing in the disco lounge is a hallucination that's a mix of both fear and drugs. Notice that there appear to be 2 Jasons in this scene. The first one is the one that we see burst through the door and then move closer to the stage. We see that this Jason is breathing heavily. He awkwardly turns his head towards something. That head turn honestly makes 0 sense based on his position relative to her in the room. He's not even looking at where he would supposedly be moving to cut her off. It's very strange. But anyway, he's a Jason who is in very active pursuit of his prey. The second Jason, though, is just standing in front of the glass panel and never once moves. Like, not at all. He's not even breathing heavily. He's also standing under a purser sign. Now, a purser is someone on a boat who's responsible for all the money handling, the administrative duties, the accounting, which is weird considering a purser would probably hate doing their accounting in a disco lounge full of bad 80s music, but whatever. Anyway, it seems to me that the way this scene is shot, it's meant to be Eva subconsciously reading the sign as pursuer, which is why she's hallucinating seeing the guy who is chasing her appearing under it. Between the stationary Jason, the sign, the constant spinning of the room, her being in a life-threatening situation, the added sensory overload of the loud music and the flashing lights, and all of it within an hour or so of her taking hard drugs, I think that this is just a confusingly shot hallucination scene. And now we go from Jason on the high seas to Jason in space! Jason X rejoins the Jason saga in the year 2455, but before we get there, we make a pit stop in 2010 to see Jason as a prisoner of the Crystal Lake Research Facility. For some reason, after decades of murder and full knowledge of his superhuman strength, the facility heads think it's totally fine having only one guard watching him round the clock. Surprise, surprise, Jason escapes and ambushes the soldiers who entered his chamber to move him to another facility. While he's murdering them, the film's main protagonist, Dr. Rowan, is standing outside the room listening to the budget-friendly carnage. Eventually, a soldier knocks down a door in front of Rowan, and while she's tending to him, the camera captures Jason standing behind her, breathing like he just sprinted to a store that was offering free machetes and self-help books about dealing with mother issues. So how could Jason throw a man through a door, but then just seconds later appear behind the person sitting there blocking said door? Thus asks Team Teleport, and thus answers theorist MatPat, 2 exits. Watch this scene closely. After tending to the soldier thrown through the door, Rowan looks directly into the room that once held Jason captive. But earlier, when we saw the soldiers entering that room, there was an alcove. Look behind the soldiers as they march into the room, there was no door behind them. To enter, they had to walk through a door and then turn left to walk in towards Jason. This means very clearly that it's not the same door that Rowan is looking through later. This is less a moment of teleporting and more of Jason finding another exit to escape and then stopping to see that, whoops, there's another living witness, so gotta go kill her too. A hulking murder monster's work is never done, I suppose. And she would have gotten away with it too if she hadn't gotten too cocky and tried to taunt him in his cryogenic cell. Idiot. So with 4 potential teleport moments sufficiently debunked, we come to the granddaddy of them all. The most infamous moment that supporters of Team Teleport point to as the definitive moment of inexplicable Jason physics for the entire franchise. In Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan again. Wait, it's a third scene from Jason Takes Manhattan? 3 out of our 5 examples are all from this one movie? Man, maybe that's why this one tends to top everyone's worst Friday the 13th list. Oh wait, no, it's definitely because it ends with him getting toxic waste dumped on him, causing him to melt until he reverts back to the scared child that he was when he died. Yep, that is how this one ends. And you wonder why I did a theory about teleporting rather than the lore of these movies. Speaking of teleporting, in our final and hardest to explain movie moment, we're not just dealing with one teleportation, we're actually dealing with 2 in less than a minute. In it, Jason, while pursuing a man down the street, seemingly teleports to the 2nd story of a building to throw him out a window, and then teleports back down to street level to finish him off. In this scene, Charles, soon to learn the definition of defenestration, looks behind him to presumably confirm the distance he is from Jason before entering an abandoned building. A 7-second pan up the building later and we see Charles launched out of a window faster than a religious official in Prague. Yeah, that is a deep-cut European history reference in your video about 80s slasher victims. Welcome to the channel. Anyway, Jason looks out the window and in another 7 seconds is standing over his target before drowning him in toxic sewage, which apparently just lays around in convenient barrels throughout the city of New York. So how did Jason get up and down the building without us ever seeing him enter or exit the door that we saw Charles go through? And how did he beat Charles up those stairs? Like Jason, I'm just gonna cut to the chase. Similar to what we just saw with Jason X, there's clearly a second entrance to the building. The biggest clue to this is when Jason appears 7 seconds later to finish off the deed. If you pay attention to the camera angle, Jason comes from another direction relative to where Charles first enters the building. Look at the scene. The entrance to the building is behind Charles on his right. Jason comes in on his left. There's clearly a second entrance to the abandoned building. We even see Jason leave the window in that direction. Had Jason been using the same staircase and entrance as Charles, he would have exited the window towards frame left. But instead, he goes to the right, presumably to use the entrance that got him up there in the first place. So here's what's happening in the scene. Charles checks to see where Jason is, doesn't see him. He enters the building. Jason, shortly behind, enters via a second entrance to cut him off at the 2nd floor. 7 seconds is plenty of time for him to run up the stairs, and we know that Charles is constantly stopping and looking behind him to make sure that Jason isn't around. Jason makes it to the 2nd floor right before the sprinting Charles. Charles sees his pursuer in front of him and decides to pull a Trish Jarvis from Friday the 13th, the final chapter, going for a Hail Mary escape by diving out through the window. Notice how his silhouette in the window looks. Going frame by frame, we can see there's never a change in his momentum, and when his body leaves the window, both of his arms are blocking his face. In all other window jump scares throughout the series, and there are a lot of them, when a character is thrown through a window, they're not actively defending themselves against the shattering glass. You'll also notice that there's no second shadow in the window. If Jason was indeed the one tossing Charles out, you'd expect to see his hulking body also silhouetted somewhere against the glass in the scene. Nope, Charles runs up the stairs, sees his pursuer, jumps out the window, misjudging how painful jumping from a second-story window is actually gonna be, and is rendered helpless until Jason steps in to finish the job. The biggest question I have now is why Charles ran into the building when he had a perfectly fine alley to run through. I personally have never been chased by an immortal hockey mask-wearing killer, but locking myself in a building seems like a terrible idea. However, much like with Eva and Miles, the fear of Jason is enough to cloud your judgment, I suppose. And you see, I think that's the point of this whole episode here. I know that a killer like Jason Voorhees seems mythic, but when you actually objectively look at the actions he takes, he's relatively human. Sure, he's a bit of a bullet sponge, and is definitely strong enough to punch a guy's head clean off his body, but outside of that, he doesn't have any magic abilities. We've concocted these epic stories of Jason, giving him teleportation powers that he just doesn't possess. He's able to kill people not because he's some supernatural beast who appears and disappears at will, but because his victims make mistakes. They see him and they panic. Instead of just running and not tripping, they race themselves into corners like Miles and Charles. They get cocky like Rowan. They panic like Eva. Or they just don't run in the first place like Lisbeth. In the end, Jason's deadliest weapon isn't his machete, it's his intimidation factor. And his machete. And the supernatural healing factor. You get the point. Anyway, it's all just a theory. A film theory. And before you teleport away to another video, if you're like me and you're in the mood for some Halloween scares, then check out our sponsor for today's episode, Shudder, the world's premier streaming service dedicated to all things horror, thriller, and supernatural. It is, in a very literal sense, the Netflix of horror movies. Not only do they have staples of the genre like Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but also underappreciated classics like The Changeling, international horrors like the Japanese Dark Water, and so many new horror mainstays like Lovecraft's insane movie Color Out of Space. And best of all, unlike other platforms like Lovecraft's insane movie Color Out of Space. And best of all, unlike other platforms that just throw content onto them, Shudder is actually hand-curated, meaning that you're gonna get a high-quality movie no matter what you click on. That sentence originally said high-quality scares, but then I found the movie that I actually wanted to highlight for today's promotion, Tammy and the T-Rex, a movie that is so cringy, so delightfully bad, that it can't even get its own title right considering the main girl is named Tanny in the opening credits. You know how The Room and Troll 2 are just those iconic so bad they're good movies? Well, Tammy and the T-Rex deserves its place on that list. It is a movie where a teenager's brain gets put into an animatronic T-Rex's body, producing iconic moments like a T-Rex trying to call on a payphone, a man getting flattened like he was run over by a steamroller, like it's some sort of Looney Tune, and pulse-pounding effects like you see here. And you can watch it right now for free on Shudder. Shudder usually has a 7-day free trial, but you can get our special offer of a 30-day free trial right now by going to shudder.com. That's S-H-U-D-D-E-R, as in fearful tremble, and not shutter, the thing that you use to open and close windows. And use the promo code FILMTHEORY when you sign up. That's gonna get you those extra couple of free weeks of horror. And considering it's the first week of October right now, that means you are covered for the entire month. So whether you're in the mood for something scary or something scarily funny this Halloween, Shudder is the service for you. I'll see you all next week for some more spooky theories.
My challenge?
Serious heart.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that was cursed by a cult to kill everyone's childhood, one theory at a time. Today, though, we get to strike at one of fictional history's most prolific killers. No, not him again. He could even kill a bunch of hobbits. What? Oh, yeah, I guess he did kill a bunch of people. Alright, so prolific might not be the right word. Today we're gonna take a stab at one of cinema's most famous killers, Michael Myers.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
Michael Michael Myers, not Mike Myers. Michael's insane and inconsistent past has been covered in 10 Halloween movies. Technically, there are 11 movies in the Halloween franchise, but Halloween 3 had nothing to do with serial killers wearing William Shatner masks, so not really important for consideration today. And yet, despite it being the second longest running horror franchise of all time at 40 years, no one in that huge stretch of time has figured out how to finish off the Shape once and for all. He is literally seen to be unstoppable, being brought back in film after film despite whatever damage he took previously. So I got to wondering, if I were a babysitter on Halloween night in Haddonfield, Illinois, the primary setting of the Halloween films, what could I do to not only survive, but be the one to finally stop Michael Myers' reign of terror once and for all? Now, if you've never seen Halloween or its army of sequels, then you're probably unfamiliar with its convoluted story. And if you have seen the movies, well then you're still probably unfamiliar with its convoluted story, since the whole thing gets retconned every time there's a new installment. Basically, Halloween is a Bildungsroman, a coming-of-age story of a young man named Michael Myers, who in 1963 opens the series by killing his older sister Judith. He spends the next 15 years in a mental asylum under the care of the single worst mental health professional of all time, Dr. Loomis.
Behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Good medical advice there, Doc. On Halloween night in 1978, Michael escapes and goes on a classic road trip adventure, despite, it's worth pointing out, never learning to drive since, again, he was locked in an insane asylum since the age of 6. Anyway, he does all your normal road trip stuff, stealing your murdered sister's gravestone, robbing hardware stores for Halloween masks, and teaching young teens the benefits of abstinence. And this kind of remains his MO for the rest of time, occasionally showing up, always on Halloween night, to slowly walk from point A to point B in order to murder some sexually promiscuous teenagers, long-lost members of his family, and the occasional hermit.
That keeps us stargazing and
Hermit, not
Bring me to my
Kermit.
men.
He's not murdering Muppets. Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, provides a deep and often detested backstory for this murderous killer, where as a child he was cursed by the Cult of Thorn to murder his entire family as this ritual sacrifice to some ancient gods, a backstory that is immediately erased just one movie later in Halloween Water. Wait, what? Halloween H2O? Yeah, that's what I said. Halloween what? H20? Oh, Halloween 20 years later, H20. That's stupid. That's a stupid name. And now the new 2018 installment takes it one step further by erasing literally everything but the very first Halloween movie, thereby making the only currently canon films in the franchise to be Halloween and its new sequel, Halloween. So stupid! It's so stupid! So we know his story, or at least as much as we can know about his story, but if we're gonna beat him, we need to know his power set. And let me tell you what a power set it is. He is slow, and he tends to use a knife. When he's presented with something like a gun, he also uses it as just a knife. Top tier killer, ladies and gentlemen. Some people seem to believe that he can teleport, but technically that's not true, because when he's arrested at the end of Halloween 5, he needs someone else to intervene and break him out of jail. Other people think that he's a cyborg because he bleeds yellow in Halloween 6, but again, that's also not true, because that yellow substance is just a chemical that he'd been injected with a few scenes earlier. So what makes this guy a murderer so threatening that I'm dedicating an episode to him? Well, to put it simply, he's unstoppable. Slap his face on a motivational poster because he is the embodiment of persistence. We've seen him shot and it doesn't work. Again, and again, and again. Jeez, guys, stop trying to shoot him. It clearly doesn't work. He survives multiple stabbings, long falls, he survives burning with minimal damage, beatings from lead pipes, and even Busta Rhymes can't get the job done when he tries to crotch shock Michael to death. That is a high voltage wire right to the groin. Ugh, yikes. So we know that shooting, stabbing, exploding, electrifying, and beating Michael won't kill him, but he is human. We see that he eats dogs in the first Halloween, and we're able to hear him breathing throughout the series. So when it comes down to it, Michael has two things going for him. Super strength, I mean, just look at that one-armed pull-up, and a healing factor that is so strong that he's able to get his eyes shot out at the end of Halloween 2, but then have him back to full functioning during the next film. So, how would you defeat Michael Myers? My first thought was acid. Just like Cell in Dragon Ball Z, you need to destroy every last particle of a regenerating creature so nothing can grow back. And with acid, it would just keep burning away no matter how much Michael regenerated. However, upon closer inspection in the series, series, this isn't the case. At the end of The Curse of Michael Myers, we see Paul Rudd, Tommy Doyle, inject Michael with a mysterious yellow goo. But upon closer inspection, the movie makes it very clear in these few frames that the goo is indeed meant to be corrosive, so acid doesn't seem to be the way to go. Then I thought, well, maybe the most boring way possible, old age. I know it's lame, but curse or no, he is clearly shown growing older and aging, starting the series at age 6 in 1963, and then 15 years later proving himself to be a big strapping adult of age 21. 23? Did no one do the math here? But again, this is a no-go. The term death by old age is actually just a blanket statement for the death brought about by the failure of an organ via old dying cells. But Michael has these super healing cells, so the organs technically would never get old enough to fail. And it seems like the movies know this, considering Judith says right before Michael's carted off to prison,
The National Guard will take him to a maximum security facility where he'll stay till the day he dies.
Never die.
so we need to attack the healing factor itself. A healing factor
I
that,
am the
unlike what
blood
we see in
of
Logan, shows no real signs of failure. But we also need to remember that, cult or no, Michael is at his core human. He was a kid, he grows up, he's referred to as a human in the movies, he gets knocked unconscious like every other scene, we see him bleed, so we can assume that at some level his body functions via basic human biology. And basic human biology is all that we're gonna need to kill him. You see, all humans have the biologic potential to heal, regrow, and even in some cases regenerate parts of their body. For instance, if your liver gets injured or you lose part of it or you donate part of it, the rest of it will grow back on its own, back to exactly the right size for your body. So what grants us our own, albeit much slower, regenerative ability? Stem cells and progenitor cells. You've probably heard of stem cells, the magic cells that start off as a blank slate but can evolve into any type of cell in your body. They're most commonly seen in the growth of babies before they're born, but all of us walking around have our own adult stem cells sitting in our body waiting for their potential to be unlocked. Now, stem cells have their cousins, progenitor cells, which are slightly more specific than stem cells, but can still grow up to become several different kinds of cell depending on what kind of progenitor they are. For instance, your endothelial progenitor cells are the ones found under your skin or near your blood vessels. When you get a cut or scrape, those cells are the ones that are thought to mobilize in order to heal that wound. And if that kind of special wound healing ability starts to give you some ideas, well, it should, because that's where we come all the way back to our old pal Michael Myers and how we're gonna finally bump him off for good this Halloween. To do the kind of wound healing we've seen Michael pull off in the movies, his stem and progenitor cells have to be running out of control. Like, sure, we can all heal from some bumps and bruises, but Michael is literally bouncing back from having his eyes shot out. His stem cells are working mega overtime. That makes our job in killing him really tough, because as long as he has those stem and progenitor cells, he can come back from literally any wound that we inflict on him. Theoretically, even something as extreme as chopping him in half wouldn't help, because with the work of his stem cells, he could just regrow the missing half of his body and keep on trucking. No, there's only one way to completely wipe out his healing ability, and that's by getting rid of every single one of those regenerating stem cells. So how the heck do we do it? One word: irradiation. Specifically, total body irradiation, or TBI. TBI is a real medical procedure, and it's been used for over 40 years to help cure very difficult diseases like leukemia. 40 years, the exact amount of time that Michael Myers has been stalking babysitters in Haddonfield. Coincidence? Yes, absolutely. In leukemia, a patient produces the wrong kinds of blood cells. Those bad blood cells are created by stem cells deep inside the person's bone marrow, which, in case you didn't know, is actually where all your new blood comes from. To treat leukemia, one option is to get rid of all the stem cells in the patient's bone marrow so that there are no cells left to produce the bad blood. Doctors do this by exposing the patient to radiation, high enough radiation to literally kill off all the stem cells existing in the bone. If it sounds scary, it is. And if you know someone who's going through this, give them tons of support, because it is basically the bravest thing you can do. And yes, that includes facing down a goofy, masked serial killer. Now, once they're without their stem cells, they can't produce any new blood at all, which is why patients receive a bone marrow transplant. In a bone marrow transplant, once the bad bone marrow has been irradiated out, new marrow from a donor is implanted so the patient has a whole new crop of stem cells, thereby ending the leukemia. Now, in our case, we're not trying to cure Michael Myers, we're trying to get him done. But the principle is the same. If we wipe out Michael's stem cells, we wipe out his healing ability, thereby making it possible to kill him without him coming back. But to do that, we're gonna need a lot of radiation. A really lethal dose, which would be much higher than what's what's used in treatment for even the toughest of cancers. Basically, we gotta zap him with everything we've got. Now, lethal radiation doses are calculated based on the radiation level to which exposure would kill 50% of people within a week. A lethal dose, then, is technically defined as 1 gray, where gray is the unit for measuring radiation. To put that in perspective, between flying on airplanes, getting the occasional X-ray, and exposing our skin to the UV rays of the sun, a typical person is exposed to 0.0024 gray of radiation per year. Super high doses for bone marrow transplant patients range from 6 to 8 gray at the absolute most. But what we need for Michael is to be so affected by radiation poisoning that he starts experiencing symptoms immediately. To get that kind of effect, we need a total body irradiation dose of 30 gray. So we need to crank the dial all the way up and hit him with the total maximum dose. And it is possible, but to do it, we have to be really, really smart. In order to expose Michael to radiation, we're first gonna need to lure him into a hospital. Easy, you simply kite him. Forgive me for using a gaming term, but kiting is the process of getting an enemy's attention and then running away as they chase you, usually while attacking the enemy. Michael Myers is one of the slowest moving killers in cinematic history, so as long as your car's doing like 1 mile per hour, you're gonna be fine. Maybe think about packing some books on tape next to all that ammo. Once we've kited him into the hospital, it's time to lure him into the radiation room. Hospitals in the US are required to build in special radiation shielding in the floors and walls.
Call you to action, mighty champion. Their lust for ruin must be sated. You shall go into the lands of the mortals to spread fear and destruction. The Norse tribes to the west shall fall easily before you. Bind those willing to join your cause, and slay the rest. Further to the south lie the nations of men. They will resist your advance, and for good reason. You will bring them annihilation, mighty lord. Devour the mortal souls to bring the favor of the Chaos Gods. March forth and spread oblivion in their name.
Tyrion's eye guides me. The storm of chaos gathers. The gods direct me! Yes, bring corruption! Now is my time. There is only war. Spread ruin on them! Charge them! I am Kingslayer!
Kill the pretenders! Show them the true meaning of death!
Reap their souls! Despiling! Running! Trimble mortals! My blade hungers! Slay every mortal! The world will scream! Very well!
Marauder horsemen!
Archaon! Give us ruin! Name your demand!
Marauder horsemen!
Throw those axes! Blood! Slay every mortal! The world will scream! Kill the Southerners! Running! Move fast! Eat their souls! Syrian's eye will see! Do not meddle in my destiny!
Walls of any rooms that contain a major radiation producing machine, so as long as he's in and you're out, which, let's face it, you should be avoiding sharing a room with that guy in general, you'll avoid irradiating yourself while Michael's busy cooking in his own personal microwave. Which obviously leads to the question, how do you get a hospital to let you, a babysitter, into their radiation room? Well, the answer is simple. Michael Myers' story is known in this universe. There's even a scene where people are watching the first Halloween movie.
The immortal classic. followed by the big giveaway at 9.
It's not just a horror movie over there, it's like a Lifetime original feature, based on a true story of heroism. And in the new Halloween movie, people are actively trying to do a podcast with Michael Myers. His story is out there. Anyway, Laurie Strode at this point has had 40 years to prep for his eventual attack. Plenty of time to get some doctors or law enforcement or both on her side. They even know what day he's gonna attack. Spoiler alert, it's always Halloween. So if we manage to keep him in the room at max dose, he should start to show signs of acute radiation poisoning in minutes, including nausea, dizziness, and shock. And this is exactly where we want him, because now it's time to go in and finish the job. That's right, after all this trouble, it's actually not going to be the radiation that kills him. Remember, the whole point of irradiating Michael was to deplete his stem cells, preventing him from healing himself. From there, we use any method available. Shoot out his eyes again, inject him with acid again, chop him with an axe, or for goodness sake, just decapitate the right guy this time, because now he's reeling with radiation poisoning and has no way to heal himself. We can finally rid the world of the terror that is Michael Myers, finishing off the Halloween movies once and for all, or at least until they reboot them in another 10 years. But hey, that's just a theory, a film theory, and cut. Hey, if you want more horror theories for this Halloween, click the box to the left to see the true ghost stories behind the Conjuring movies. Or click the box to the right to find out why the Blair Witch was the least of the filmmakers' problems when it came to the Blair Witch Project. And finally, make sure you subscribe for more creepy theories that happen not just on Halloween, but all year round. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go answer the door. There's some trick-or-treaters outside.
you down below, down to the devil's shore, to be his guest forever. Peace of mind is less than ever. Hate to twist your mind, but God ain't on your side. An old acquaintance sever. For the world, your last endeavor. Ashes burning, you can smell it in the air, 'cause men like you have such an easy soul to steal. So stand in line while they hit numbers in your head. You're now a slave until the end of time. Nothing stops the madness turning. Hunting, dirty, pull the trigger. You should have known the price of evil. And it hurts to know that you belong here. Yeah. It's your fucking nightmare. Can't wake up and sweat, 'cause it ain't over yet. Still dancing with your demons. Victim of your own creation. Beyond the will to fight, where all that's wrong is right. Where hate don't need a reason. All that self-assassination. You've been lied to just to rid you of your side, and now they have enough to tell you how to feel. So sedated as they medicate your brain, and while you slowly go insane, they tell you living with the best intentions, help you with your complication. You should have known the price of evil, and it hurts to know that you belong here. Yeah, no one to call, everybody to feel. Your tragic fate is looking so clear. Yeah, it's your fucking nightmare. Fight, not to fail, not to fall, or you'll end up like the others. Die again, drenched in sand, with no respect for another. Feel the fire, feel the hate. Your pain is what we desire. Lost, hit the wall, watch you crawl. Such a replaceable liar. And I know you hear their voices. And I know they may seem real, but our lives made up of choices.
Tyrion's eye guides me. I am the chosen of the gods. The gods agree. The storm of chaos gathers.
I will not disgrace my ancestors.
Spirit of Morka. Now the end time has come. Yes, bring corruption. I may be merciful. The gods agree. There'll be a reckoning. The storm of chaos gathers. Charge them! mortal fool! My blade hungers! I am Kingslayer! Now! Quickly! Blood for the Blood God! Now! Fight! Marauder horseman! Faster! Our blades hunger! Chaos Squad! Kill! Maim! Burn! Marauder horsemen! Chaos Marauders! Chaos comes! Corn demands! Marauder horsemen! Take it, Southerner! Slanish his perverse glory! Chaos comes! Seed of blood! Marauder horsemen! Archaon! Swords of chaos to me! Quickly! Chaos Marauders! Nurgle's pestilent glory! What? False order! Slay every mortal! Marauder horseman! Blood! Archaon! What? Attack the mortals! Ah! Condiments! Exalted hero! My god's call! Exalted hero! Kill the Southerners! The world will burn!